everyone. So I had some more thoughts about the the living seed and phytates and the whole thing with eating whole grains and beans and nuts and seeds and the seed phase. And one of the things that got me thinking was this story, which I did a little research on about the Anasazi bean. The story goes that like an anthropologist found a clay jar with these beans in it that they carbon tested, and they were 1,500 years old, dated back to 1,500 years from the Native Americans, and they planted these beans, and some of them sprouted, and then they propagated, and then they have Anasazi beans. We have Anasazi beans today. Now others say that's just a myth, and that beans can only last 50 years stored. After that, they won't germinate, and we have Anasazi beans because Native Americans kept propagating, kept growing them. Either way, it still brings up an interesting point about the nature of seeds, which is interesting, and I want to expand on that. That in the life cycle of plants, we have different stages. And I think about these things in relation to yin and yang and the five transformations. It's a cyclical process. So the seed stage is, you could say it's the beginning, it's also the end because, it's a cycle. But it's a dormant stage, and it relates to the metal transformation. If you know the five transformations. And metal is very inward. And what's interesting about the seed stage is that it can last, 50 years or maybe even 1,500 years. I'm not convinced that it's just a story, but I'm not going to argue that point. That's irrelevant. I believe it would probably, under the right circumstances and the right food, probably can last a lot longer than 50 years. I'm only 44, so that's longer than me. So that's a long time, for something that is alive to be in a state of stasis, right? And it speaks of the nature of metal. Metal is very inward, contracting, and just kind of holding. It's in a holding pattern. So I want to expand on this. In order to germinate a seed, we need to soak it in water, okay? And what comes after metal in five transformations? Water, right? So the seed is essentially, we can draw some parallels. The seed parallels the unfertilized egg, right? So, even like if you eat eggs, like chicken eggs, that's the same energetic phase, unfertilized. So Sawa recommended fertilized eggs. So that's water, adding water, germination. So the male sperm is water nature. Right, so adding water to the metal to fertilize it, bringing it over. Also, in a woman, the unfertilized egg is similar. It's in a stasis. It's in a state of stasis. It's alive, but it can last a long time unchanged. Just storage. So this is the metal nature. It's just very contracted, unchanging stasis. And we can draw another parallel. In our daily cycle, we have the day and night cycle. And the metal, even though sometimes we think of sleep as water, sleep is actually, the deepest sleep is a metal state. It's a state of stasis. Okay, right? And then what do we do in the morning? Water. We use water. We wash our face, brush our teeth, shower, and then we drink water to raise our blood sugar and to wake up. So water nature, natural water, is utilized to bring things out of the metal phase, bring things out of the stasis of metal, and to fertilize and to wake things up. So we could say unfertilized seed or fertilized, what do we call it, germinated, ungerminated seed, the seed in state to state, dry seed. When we buy seeds that are raw, they are sleeping. These are asleep, okay, because they can just stay that way for a long time. We can store dry seeds, dry grains, dry beans, dry nuts, dry seeds, all of them. They're living seeds, but they're in a state of stasis, metal. It's important to understand this because, especially in macrobiotics, we put so much emphasis on whole grains. We say like, oh, the basis of every meal should be whole. I'm not disputing that. I'm not mocking that or anything. It's just important to really understand this and to put a lot of effort into thinking about this and to really hone in on what that means. So that's the beginning stage of a plant, the metal, stasis, the seed. And then we germinate it with water, soaking in water. And then the next stage is wood. It starts to sprout. And in Nanki, that would be the 3-tree stage, but just wood in general. It starts to move up if you go on the spiral, the circle of the plant life. And so that's where life begins. And then the life cycle moves. The three tree stage or the wood stage, where it's the seed is starting to sprout, or at least very least germinated. Germination is water. The sprouting is tree. That's very quick action, so this is very different from the stasis of metal, where it can stay for at least 50 years, maybe 1,500 years, and the tree stage, where it's quickly growing up and expanding. And then the plant grows out of that, and then we have the full-grown plant, and then it flowers, and that's approaching fire. Then it bears fruit. That's after fire, going into soil, and then the fruit bears seed, and that's the soil stage, where the fruit falls, it rots, and the seed comes to the ground, right? And then, depending on the circumstances, either the seed dries up and stays in the metal stasis stage. Metal is stasis. Metal is slumber. Metal is time. Metal will just sit there for years and years and years. But under the right circumstances, that seed will again germinate water, and the cycle continues. Where it stops is the metal. Metal is the point in the life cycle where it can stop and just stay there for indefinitely. We don't know how long. It depends on what we're talking about, but a long time. So it's just important to understand this cycle of things. And so when we eat grains, we're at the beginning of the cycle, right? And we are understanding, remember that food relates to thinking. So if we eat grains, we're taking something that's at the very beginning stage. And what's the significance of this? That means that we can, as it relates to thinking, we can understand things all the way from the beginning to the end. But if we just eat raw rice that's unfertilized, that's just, hard, we don't do that, right? We soak it and cook it. But if we just say, like, let's simplify, we just take rice, put it in a pot, cook it. There's not much process in that. And we're not going around the circle. We're not giving much development to that. So that's not going to create great thinking. Remember in macrobiotics, George Asawa said to chew grain, because that's also part of the process. And in order to develop good thinking, we need to take something from the beginning and process it, bring it through all the way to the end. So what that means is making a process, having a process. And that's why food processing is so important, natural home food processing. That creates good thinking, good digestion, good, abundant health, right? But if we minimize that process, we're dumbing down down the process. We're reducing the process. We're not thinking enough in essence, because the parallel, like just eating raw rice is not going to do it. It's not healthy enough, and there's not enough process in there. That would create stupid mind, stupid thinking, right? Just eating raw rice, raw any seed, because of the process. But think about things. What happens with leafy greens? Can we eat leafy greens raw? Sometimes we can eat leafy greens raw, right? Because they've already, from the seed, they've already been processing. The earth has been processing them. What about fruit? We eat a lot of raw fruit, right? Well, we can eat raw fruit, right? Especially berries. But fruit is often eaten raw. Why? Because the process. But how many seeds do we eat raw? Which seeds do we eat raw? And by seeds, I mean all the living seeds, like grains, beans, nuts, and seeds. Which do we eat raw? Do we eat raw beans? No. We don't eat any raw beans. Which grains do we eat raw? None. I mean, traditionally, who's, been living off of raw grain? Nobody. Everybody cooks their grains, because grains are at the beginning stage of the development. They need processing. Do you understand what I'm saying? Everything needs to process, whether it's processing externally or processing where we're processing it. Everything needs processing, right? And that's why, like, if you go and buy miso, that's a process, right? And then we can argue about how to cook miso or whatever, what's the best. But the point is that it's already processed, and somebody did that processing for you. Whether the earth is doing the processing by growing it, taking time to develop the seed and grow a plant and grow the flower, grow the leaf, grow the fruit, grow the stem, that's a process. So the earth can do the process, or we can do the process. We can buy it already processed, like miso, shoyu, umeboshi, and other natural food processing, sauerkraut, sourdough bread, so many different food processes. And then there's even, like, we can go out and buy Twinkies. That's also a food process. But with Twinkies, we don't recommend that kind of food process, because it's so far removed from nature that we lose the connection to nature when we eat things like that are heavily processed in unnatural ways. Like to trace Twinkies actually have their origin in nature, but it's very far back, and it's very hard to trace all the way back to, the flour, the corn, the sugar. And we're losing so much of the naturalness that it's pulled apart, and then they're fertilized, so many chemicals. So I'm not, that'll create stupid thinking, because it's heavily processed, and you're going to get like a kind of very disjointed, compartmentalized thinking from that, that's very removed from nature. Versus, there's two kinds of stupid. There's stupid from eating Twinkies, and then there's stupid from eating raw rice that's uncooked. One, the raw rice is connected to nature, so you'd be like, like a dumb animal. You'd be connected to nature. The other one is dumb because it's so far removed from nature, and it's very far out there, and it's, technically processed. You might be good at some things. It might help with computer, like you might be like have some computer coding knowledge, but you're going to be so disconnected from nature. You're not going to have any connection to nature, so it's lacking in that kind of natural intelligence, right? But if we take the grain, which is the very beginning, it's like a baby. It's less than a baby. It's the unfertilized egg. And then we fertilize it. We soak it. We're growing this kind of, we're processing it. We're growing the seed. We're growing this little baby. We're germinating. And then we're sprouting it, right? If you want to take that, it's just up to you, germination, sprouting. And I recommend different things. I think sprouting is good. I think we should sprout grains, beans, seeds, and nuts, because that's variety. And that gives a different perspective, because it's all processing, and it's all developing our thinking ability, right? So then we cook it after we germinated it or sprouted. I think we should cook. I think sprouting's not enough. I don't think we should just be like, oh, sprouting things, or let's just eat everything sprouted. No. Sometimes if you carry out sprouts in the summer, full sprouts, that's good too. But a lot of times sprouting, germinated, it's better cooked, because that's further processing, right? And then, so we have our cooked, germinated or spotted seeds. You can either boil it or pressure cook it. You know, it's better wet. And then at the very least, we're doing more processing by chewing. That's what the importance of chewing, because again, that's processing. Before you swallow it, everything before you swallow it is a process. And, you know, Osawa recommended chewing. And he also said non-credo. What's non-credo? Non-credos don't believe. Well, the parallel with chewing and swallowing is that swallowing is where we believe. That's the parallel. Once we swallow it, we lose our ability to change the food anymore. It's done. And that's the equivalent of believing a thought. Once we believe a thought, we're not thinking about it anymore. We've swallowed it. So non-credo means process your food, grains and beans especially, grains and beans, nuts and seeds. Anything that's a seed needs a lot of processing. So home food processing, chewing, you know, so the whole 9 yards, all of it. Sometimes fermentation, sometimes grinding it into flour. But you know, the more life we can add to it, the better. That's why soaking it and germinating is good, because that's adding life force versus roasting it. Roasting the nuts and seeds and just eating it, that's kind of dumb actually, because you're arresting the growth. You know, the more I think about it, the less I like the idea of roasted seeds and nuts. You're arresting a very immature stage of plant development. The seed is a very immature stage. It's great because it's so connected to nature, and when you can take it the whole way, you know, process it a lot, it creates a lot of intelligence because you're understanding the whole process, the beginning to the end. If you just eat a processed food, a well-processed food, you understand the end. It's like receiving an answer, like somebody gives you the final answer, but you didn't do anything to get the answer. Somebody just tells you the answer. Somebody just like, here's the ultimate answer. Oh, I got the ultimate answer, but I didn't do anything to earn that answer. Somebody just told me. Somebody else did the work and I'm receiving the benefit. Well, you're not getting enough benefit that way. You get the full benefit when you go through the whole process. That's why grains, beans, seeds, and nuts are, when you process them properly, that's when you're going to create the most intelligence, the most ability to understand nature and life, because you're taking the whole 9 yards, right? So that's why I don't think roasted seeds and nuts are all that great. And in macrobiotics, we rely a lot on that. And then like, so condiments are more processed. We're roasting, you know, like gamasio, for example. We're not only roasting the sesame seeds, but we're also roasting salt, then we're grinding it together. Then we're eating it with rice, which is, you know, hopefully soaked well enough and then cooked properly. So there's some processing there. But just plain roasted seeds and nuts, I don't think is that great. You know, I'm repeating myself. I know I said this before, and I'll probably say it again because I think people need to hear it. There's not enough process there, and I think it creates stupid thinking. So I think we need to think about these things more and keep thinking about them, because that's processing. And the more we can develop good natural process, the more intelligence we can have. And that's so important because as humanity, we need to evolve. You know, and part of that, a big part of that is conscious evolution. We don't just say, well, evolution is going to happen. We just sit back and relax and do nothing. We have a duty to be conscious and to consciously evolve. That's one of the things that comes with intelligence, right? So, let's see. This whole idea of taking what is essentially something that's very mature and processing and bringing it up to you know, a much greater level of maturity is very important, right? The soaking is germinating the seed and bringing life into it versus roasting, you know, fire and water. The roasting is killing it. And the roasting, fire, if you understand the 5 transformations, the life cycle, fire, what comes after fire? Earth. And what is the earth cycle? That's the death cycle. That's why when we have too much fire, we encourage cancer. That's where cancer comes from. Fire, if you think about all the carcinogens that we know about, they all come from fire, most of them. Most of the time they come from fire, from too much fire. And then we have a decay, because earth is decay. It's going down, it's the death cycle. This is the life cycle, this is the death cycle. Up is life, down is death. Fire goes down, leads to down. Fire produces ash. And so when we rely too much on fire, we increase the death cycle. We feed the death cycle. So that's why water is leaning more towards water for health is much more important. You know, we utilize fire, but not without water for health, you know, for the most health, for the greatest health. It's important to understand this, that soaking, germinating, that's where we get the most life from. And that when we take this stasis seed, which is asleep, you know, we have to wake it up. And roasted seeds and nuts, that's not waking it up, that's actually capturing the sleep state. It's important to understand this, really. If we want to grow and evolve, if we want to wake up ourselves, then we have to eat foods that are awake. And that's why a lot of people find, you know, grains, beans, nuts, and seeds so heavy, and they say, it makes me tired, because if you're eating something in its sleep state, especially if you're not germinating, if you're not sprouting, right? If you're just eating it, cooking it as it is, or even just roasting it, eating it like that, you're capturing something in its asleep state. Remember, beans can last 50 years or 1,500 years possibly, or any seed. You know, I think different seeds probably have their own different life cycles, but generally a long time, many years. And people who are not germinating their seeds, not soaking enough, they're not growing their mind, because there's such a parallel. The seed relates to the mind, the seed relates to the brain, the seed also relates to the eye. So seeds influence the eyes and the brain a lot, right? And what about the third eye? What we call the third eye, right? If you want to wake up, the third eye, what do you think? Eating something that's asleep is going to help wake up the third eye, wake up your chakras, open up all your chakras, raise your consciousness, make you more intelligent, make you more spiritual, grow your evolution, grow your soul, right? So this is, if we're talking about the original intention of macrobiotics, which Osawa meant it to grow our consciousness, to evolve, to reach higher and higher levels of judgment. It's important to understand. And we can't just think that, like, Osawa had all the answers, Michio had all the answers, the Japanese had all the answers. It's not the way any of this works, okay? That's lazy, it's uncreative, and it's dumb, it's stupid. It's our responsibility to grow macrobiotics, to evolve macrobiotics, just as it's our responsibility to evolve our own understanding, our own consciousness, and our own soul. So I want you to think about something that has occurred to me. Some people might know this. I want to show you something that I didn't understand for a long time, but it took me until recently to understand. And there was some intuitive understanding in the past, which I'll show you. This is one of the tattoos I got. Why did I get this? I can't tell you exactly why I got this tattoo, but it's the Eye of Horus, ancient Egyptian symbol of wisdom, insight, and a lot of people correlate it to the third eye, right? The pineal gland. But look at it. Remember, I said that the seeds relate to the eye and the brain. The other correlation of this, what this symbol means, is not only the third eye, but the awakening of this seed state, the slumber state, moving from metal to water to tree, the awakening, remember? Awakening, enlightenment, growing consciousness to become awake, spiritually awake and evolved. This is what this is, right? What is this and what is this? When you soak a seed, when it germinates and then it starts to send out roots, if you ever watch this, I think it depends on what kind of seed you have, but some of them, especially I think grain, rice, send out two shoots. One is the root, one is the leaf. This is the leaf, this is the root. Okay? Do you understand that? I figured this out. Nobody ever said this that I know of. This is my realization, just so you know. Okay? And so what this means is this is a symbol of awakening, and this is a symbol of awakening the living seed. Okay? So if you want to wake up, if you want to increase your consciousness, it's important to understand this. This is what the ancient Egyptians knew. Right? It means, among other things, there are many parallels, and we have to think one of the ways to understand nature and life is to think in parallels, to think in energetic parallels. But this means soak your seeds and germinate them so that they look like this. They're sending out shoots, and that's going to wake up your mind. It's going to wake up your eyes, your inner eyes, your conscious eyes. It's also probably really good for your eyesight, in literal terms. But to open up your consciousness, to raise your consciousness. Remember, Kundalini starts out at the base of the spine, and it has to raise all the way up to the top. Well, how do you get that? By enhancing the food. Remember, food is so important. Food directs our energy, right? So that's one of the secrets of macrobiotics that we understand about how to utilize food properly, right? So, just because Michio Nosawa didn't say certain things, it doesn't mean that they're not valid. We have to keep teaching ourselves. That's the whole point of macrobiotics. We eat the food, we chew it, we process it, and we understand new things constantly. So this is an insight that I'm sharing with you guys, that in order to raise a consciousness, that the slumbering, sleeping seed state needs to be woken up. And it wakes up through water, through soaking. And, you can germinate it or sprout it, but that's important. And I think we need to utilize that a lot more. Now's the time to wake up. I mean, now's the time to spiritually grow and evolve. So understand this knowledge. If you want to wake up, if you want to raise your consciousness, raise your kundalini, open up your chakras, open up your third eye, you need to take the sleeping seeds because they're asleep. And if you want to wake up, you have to wake the seeds up. You have to wake your food up. If you eat sleeping food, you're going to fall asleep. And I know a lot of macrobiotic people are just happy to fall asleep, just be like, we already have the answers. We follow Michio Kushi and George Osawa, and we're done thinking. We're just going to eat our, unsoaked or barely soaked whole grain, and that's it. A lot of people will do that, and they'll probably stay there for the next 1,500 years, unevolving, because that's what happens when you're asleep. So if you want to stay asleep, do the same thing over and over again. If you want to wake up, you have to actually grow, okay? And growth means change. So, and growth means not doing the same thing over and over again. Growth means thinking, evolving, growing. And growth means growth, right? So, you can't, if growth is really your main goal for macrobiotics, you can't be overly attached to the past, really. You have to let the past be where it is, utilize it, look at it, study it, but not be attached to it, right? Don't resist it, but don't be attached to it, right? So let's see, was there anything else that I wanted to mention? Um, that's basically where I'm at with the whole thing. And to bring it back to the phytates, well, yeah, when you sprout things, the phytates, you're utilizing the phytates. That's what the phytates are for, actually. They're for the growth of the seed. They're food for the sprouting of the seed. So you're using up the phytates when you sprout it, and further by cooking it. So the more we can process our food, especially grains, beans, nuts, and seeds, which need the most processing, the more we're going to help our digestion and our brain and our intelligence and our consciousness grow. And it means the right kind of processing, where we're bringing up that life cycle to the tree, from water to tree, up, right? The upward momentum. That's what we want when we're talking about growth and evolution of consciousness. The plant cycle that's up, not the fire cycle that leads to death, right? That's what cancer is. Cancer is fire to soil. It's a decay. We're not supporting life anymore. So utilize the upward life cycle. So I'm giving you guys some very important information, and I hope you will utilize it. I hope you understand it. Less fire, because that leads to death. More water, that leads to life. Understand that? Seeds, water, seeds, metal, water, tree, up. That's growth. That's really the essence of macrobiotics. It was a mistake. It was not a complete thought to overutilize fire, because fire leads to death. Too much fire leads to death. More water leads to life. So understand this. This is understanding. This is yin and yang 5 transformation thinking. Okay? So this is important knowledge. All right. I think that's it. Thanks for watching, for those who are watching.